Hey, Mark Rodriguez here, and we're with the America's second number one Cure of Insomnia, the fighting podcast. It's kind of, I mean, there's some fighting involved in this one, more or less. And as usual, I'm not alone. With me are
This is Jupi-chan or Ninja Jupe or whatever you want to call me. Yo.
Rikki Roxx, God of Thunder, Lord of Rock and Roll, icon of all things old school. Happy to be here as usual on the podcast, and that's going to bring it to the one, the only, the man himself, the man of the hour, the tower of power, too sweet to be sour, the one and only Mr. Electricity. Introduce yourself.
Scotty Rodriguez.
he got so hyped up, he just had to like say it more strongly this time. There you go.
You are the thunder, and I am the lightning, brother.
There we go. But okay, so this episode we're gonna be talking about the Sonic the Hedgehog 90's cartoons.
Yes.
Especially with how interesting it is that the first two of them were released at the exact same time and were very different versions, which I'm sure some kids were confused. I mean, I got it, but you know, and we'll talk about the third one too and everything. So I believe to start us off, Rikki Roxx has some history on exactly why they released two versions of the same cartoon at the same time. One was weekdays, the other one was like Saturday.
Indeed, indeed. So it was an interesting time in cartoons and video game cartoons. Now, last time we got together very recently, we did a hell of a job, gents and lady, on the 80s video game cartoons, the most prominent ones, the Marios, the Donkey Kongs, the Zeldas, what have you. So as the 80s begat the 90s, some of those shows were kind of going away, but other characters were becoming popular in the video game sphere, Sonic the Hedgehog being the most prominent, and therefore animation was the next natural place to go after he'd conquered the video game sphere. By 93, you know, the first two games were out, set the world on fire. You know, how much more can we say about Sonic the Hedgehog in the early 90s, you know? And so Sega of America, Tom Kalinske, they got together with DiC Animation Studios, who had also done the very successful Mario cartoons of the late 80s and up to that point. You know, the Mario Brothers, Mario 3, Super Mario World. DiC had produced all of those to various degrees of success. So what happened was Sega of America and DiC were working a deal with ABC for a Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon air on Saturday mornings exclusively. So that was all well and good. They had some very vague ideas about what the show was going to be because, as you know, first two games especially, there wasn't a lot of story and lore set yet for the Sonic universe. Not, you know, there's only a couple characters. Like it was Sonic, there was Robotnik. By the second game, there was Tails, and everybody else was either a robot or an NPC, right? So, but right away they were taking notes, trying to flesh out a background cast to have other enemy characters, other heroic characters for Sonic and Tails to interact with. So they were already laying the groundwork. Excuse me. They were working with Archie Comics on a comic book at the same time. And all of this is important because they all sort of converged and they came out of one central nexus point, but they became individually very different things. So in a way, they all begat each other. The comic begat each of the cartoon shows, but the cartoon shows themselves sort of accidentally created the other. I'll explain to what I mean by that. So they were developing the Saturday morning show. But then DiC had other ideas. They wanted to extend the show into syndication. They didn't just want to be on Saturday mornings. They wanted to produce a show that would be on every day after school, like other cartoons had been successful with, like their Mario cartoons had been successful with earlier on. But ABC was not about that. The president of ABC said, if you want to go do a syndicated show, go do a syndicated show, but it won't be on ABC because that's going to be violating our agreement. We solicited you for this over here. So there was some back and forth, hem and haw, and then finally somebody had the bright idea, well, why don't you just do two shows? And they found the resources. There was some negotiation, but so they said, okay, so we'll do two separate shows. DiC will produce one specifically for ABC Saturday mornings and one specifically for before school, after school weekdays. So both shows were in development at the same time. And that's why the comic book, which debuted about a year before either of the shows, was such an interesting thing. Because the first year or so of the Archie comic book for Sonic the Hedgehog contains elements of what would become both of the cartoon shows sort of mashed together. Right from the beginning, you had a cast of characters known as the Freedom Fighters, which were the good guys. So you had this extra half dozen heroic characters that would become prominent in the Saturday morning show. But you also had this very lighthearted, slapstick, comedic, Bugs Bunny sort of storytelling style and tone that would become significantly identified with the syndicated Sonic cartoon. And again, that's because both shows were being developed at the same time. So the comic book was like a marriage of both of them. So the earliest issues of the comic were pretty much what the Saturday morning show was going to be. But then when they decided it was going to be two shows, Deke went back to the drawing board and said, well, we don't want to just do the same show twice over. What we'll do is we'll make this weekday show its own thing. We'll start over from scratch on that. And then the Saturday morning show, we'll make that a little bit more serialized, a little bit more grown up, a little bit more sophisticated, a totally different style completely. As much difference as you could get and still call it Sonic the Hedgehog, basically. Which was a good idea, I think, because it gave not only something else to watch, but it really did give each show its own identity, for better or worse, which we'll talk about. But yeah, so that's how it ended up being. And so the Saturday morning show was a little deeper into production. That was more solidified. But then they took the remaining resources and did the syndicated show. And the syndicated show actually came out first by about 2 weeks in 93. The syndicated one was Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and that came out in the fall of 93. And then 2 weeks later, the first episode of Saturday Morning Sonic debuted. It was a completely different show. So that's the why, the big why. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of confusion at the time. I just explained it as easily as it can be explained, by the way. If you had any questions, or I'm sure a lot of us had some confusion back in the day as to why there were two shows, right?
Sort of. I mean, I knew they were different. I mean, I guess if you're like a real little kid, you would be confused, but, you know, we knew they were different shows. We just didn't know the reason. Like, why would they have two different, you know what I mean? Completely different shows with the same characters, same general basic premise. Dr. Robotnik kind of sort of looked the same in both versions. Just one was more serious, you know, but he still had the same
Actually, he had a
mustache and all that.
completely different art style, different outfit, different mustache. It was like everything else, because I just watched him before we sat down to do this. That's why it's so fresh. Yeah, no, he didn't look the same at all. He had a completely different art style too.
Yeah, but like the overall design, you know what I mean? Like one's like if you draw it cartoony, the other one's you draw it more serious. You know what I mean? Like the same, just like he didn't look like he looked like in the games. You know what I mean? Like I guess they figured he looks too simplistic in the games, just make him look more menacing or whatever. And
in the comic book, that was where they announced there was going to be a cartoon. Early on in the letters pages of the comic, I think by like somewhere around issue 5 or 6, they said there's going to be a cartoon coming out next fall. And that was the first time, remember, in 93, internet, not really a thing. So this is how you found out. You open up the comic, you got to the last page, and they're like, oh, watch fall Saturday mornings ABC. There's going to be this Sonic cartoon. So, and they promised like all your favorite freedom fighters, you know, Princess Sally and the rest of them. And then they didn't mention there was going to be another show. They said one show was coming out. But then Adventures of Sonic came out first by 2 weeks. So everybody sat down to watch that, and then they were very confused because they're like, wait a minute, I read that the Freedom Fighters were going to be in this and all of that, and it was going to be like the comic book. What happened? And so they wrote to the comic book asking what happened, and that's where they were like, oh, okay, there's actually two shows. For some reason, they didn't announce that until people what the hell about the first show. They're like, no, okay, yeah, the second show is coming out real soon. So, and it did. So that was a lot more satisfying to fans of the comic because, again, the comic fans were specifically watching to see those characters that they knew. You know what I mean? So that it was affecting what kind of audience each show was going to have. Before either show had even debuted, they were already kind of segregating what kind of audience each one was going to have. So it was a pretty interesting experiment, all things considered.
yeah. So Johnny, what memories do you have of the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog to start it off? This is one that we both watched the most, so you probably have the most memories, give or take.
So the very cartoony Sonic cartoon, I think I remember that one a little bit more than the other one. But well, my first impression is that obviously, I guess I wanted to take advantage of the popularity of the Urkel actor. I forget his name, Jamal White. I think that's his name.
White.
Yeah,
Jaleel White.
he got to be Sonic across the board. He was the Sonic of the 90s because he was in all the cartoons. And remember, before they started putting him in his voice in video games, this was the only time you ever heard Sonic speak. To an entire generation of kids, Sonic, that's what he sounds like. They did 3 shows with him as the voice. So that's actually pretty interesting. You couldn't say that about Mario. You couldn't say that about any of the other characters. Only Sonic got that honor in the 90s. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And it's cool, too, because, it makes the actor much more popular. Everybody starts to recognize him a lot more. I guess he also did that because he wants to step out of, being Oracle all the time. So, hey, I want to voice a Sonic in all the 3 cartoons, right? And yeah, that was very interesting. But the cartoon was very cartoony, something serious, and something to think much about it. It does feel a lot kind of like a modern version of the Looney Tunes in many aspects.
Yes.
And Robotic was just funny as hell.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like, you hit a lot of cool shit right out of the park on that. Yeah, at the time, it was amazing because it was the first thing Jaleel White had really done after Urkel. Excuse me. So when they announced he was going to be Sonic, people were not with it, man. I was there. I remember. Like, people were like, really? Like, some people were like, I don't know, I could maybe see it. But it wasn't until you actually watched it where people were like, oh, dude, that's perfect. Like that, like, he nailed it, Maybe not, like, the all-time best in my opinion, but, like, definitely an iconic version, a very consistent version. He aged it up a little bit, I noticed, for Sonic Underground. He, like, tweaked it a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a total Michael Keaton Batman thing, where at the beginning when it was announced, people were like, that ain't gonna work. And then later on, when they announced Sonic Adventure for Dreamcast, and they announced that Jaleel White wasn't going to be doing the voice of Sonic, people were furious. They were like, what the fuck do you mean? He is Sonic. What are you talking about? He's not going to be in the game.
That.
So it came full circle from people saying Urkel can't be Sonic to he's the only one who can do it. So I thought that was pretty cool. Sometimes you just got to.
If you don't think Jaleel White could voice Sonic, that's no good.
I mean,
Oh, man. So basically, the premise was very simplistic. It was just Sonic and Tails basically going through town to town and either eating hot dogs or going after whatever Robotnik's latest scheme is.
No, they're eating chili dogs.
Oh, sorry, chili dogs. You're right. And Robotnik basically either wants to take over the world or just fuck with Sonic, basically, because some plans were just to mess up his day. Others were to outright kill him. He had the what was it? Super Search and Smash Squad?
The
Super Special Search and Smash Squad?
Super Special Sonic Search and Smash Squad.
Oh, there you go. Which was Scratch and Grounder. Which
Bebop and Rocksteady.
Yeah. And the weird thing, Scratch always confused me because he wasn't really into games, so to speak. And Grounder, well, he was Grounder from Sonic 2 in the underwater levels, but he was like red or something. He wasn't green. And he also added the extra thing where his hands and stuff, he was like basically a living, what do you call it? Oh, damn. What do you call those multi-purpose tool things? The ones that kind of look like switchblades, but they got other things.
Like a universal.
Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, like those. He had all kinds of wacky gadgets and things that would just come out of his hands when needed and stuff.
Or his tongue, which was weird.
Yeah. And occasionally coconuts would be there for whatever reason. It's so weird because he seemed to be sort of the most competent, but then he was like just relegated to being like the janitor or some other bullshit and everything. And alongside whatever robot, well, it's a weird thing because sometimes either that's the main plot or it's like the side plot, because you know how the bad guys do, like the Turtles, send beat up Rocksteady to smash stuff. So when the Turtles are fighting them, the Shredder does whatever the real plan is. It's kind of like that. Send them after Sonic while Robotnik does whatever he's doing. And it would do all kinds of, again, Looney Tunes style gags with weird traps. The traps always backfire. It's like a cartoon for kids. It's kind of like, the whole explaining, if he goes here and we cut the rope here and this will fall there, whatever, and of course it backfires. And extra credit because since they're robots, they could get absolutely smashed and destroyed and everything because Robotnik will just, rebuild them again and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I was in looking back on it, I was actually very shocked at how much it borrowed from Looney Tunes. I was like, wow, because it borrows primarily from two things. It definitely has a lot of Bugs Bunny Roadrunner type stuff, and also it definitely feels very reminiscent of the earlier Mario shows, which I'm guessing was by purpose and design because Deke probably figured, look, we already had success with it in this formula. Let's not reinvent the wheel here. It worked before. Let's do the same thing. I mean, you could, on a lot of the episodes, you could pretty much swap the Sonic cast of characters out for the Mario cast of characters and just maybe tweak one or two plot elements and it would be the same exact thing. You could put Robotnik and Bowser, you could flip that and, it'd be the same plot essentially.
Yeah.
So, for me, there was 2 periods of time where I watched the show. I saw it when it ran for its first run because I had a buddy who was a huge Sonic fanatic, way more than I ever was. He fell out of it. Ironically, he fell out of it as he got older, and I kind of stayed involved. So I've mentioned him before. He sold me his old early Archie Sonics for a song, and then now they're worth a shitload of money. But it was basically pity on them and me because he was like, I'm just going to mess them up if I keep them because I'm not good with my stuff. So he just had me take them off his hands. But yeah, so he watched it religiously. So a lot of times I'd watch it at his house after school or whatever. We'd go right to his house. He lived across the street from the school, so we'd just pretty much dart right over there and watch that. And then a couple of years later, I watched it a little more when it was on before school on a different channel. It would be on at 7 or 7:30. So I was in junior high by that point. I didn't have to go to school till 8:30. That was always late anyway. So if I was up early, I'd watch reruns of Adventures of Sonic. Just to, have something on the TV when I was getting ready for school. I remember it used to be in a block. They'd have an hour they'd have Sonic for a half hour and then they'd have Sailor Moon. I was like, okay,
wow,
put them together.
Weird. One thing about the cartoon though, when you compare Mario to Sonic, I mean, Mario had its goofy, stuff too, but I feel more like the Looney Tunes stuff and the popping eyes out and all that crazy stuff. They have it way more in Sonic. And Sonic, despite the main character, of course, the whole show was a bit more fast-paced and crazy and traps, explosions, boom. It was a very loud cartoon because everyone's always screaming, yelling, explosions, whatever. Keep the kids entertained and stuff and whatever. I kind of feel like in a Mario cartoon, if the kids are too young, they might not really follow the plot, but they'll at least watch it because, hey, Mario's there. Hey, he's doing fireballs. Oh, it's Sonic. It's just, noise, explosions, robotic, it's a hedgehog and all that kind of goofy.
It's a very zany show for better and worse. I feel like the word zany pretty much encapsulates it perfectly. But yeah, I mean, there's good and bad to that for sure. Like I said, I definitely watched it. I definitely have memories of it that are fond. It's not my favorite of the shows for various reasons, but I mean, it definitely, not only did it have its audience, but it knew what audience it wanted. I mean, as again, a lot of people like to compare and contrast the two shows, and some people
not a fair comparison.
Yeah, it's hard not to do that when they were airing at the same time, but also because they're so different. But what's weird about, even as natural as it is, what's weird about the whole oh, I like this one better, I like this one better. The thing is, right from the jump, the whole point was for them to be completely different and attract different audiences with different sensibilities. That was literally the mission. As soon as they knew they were doing two shows, the entire point became, let's keep the main character is the same and literally every other thing is different. Even Tails was a different character between the two shows. He had very little, he was a different color. Even Tails was different. So everything was different. So whether you like one over the other, it comes down more to preference, really, of personal taste rather than anything the shows themselves do or don't do, you know?
Yeah.
I think if you have a preference for like the very low stakes, wacky Looney Tunes kind of show, like if you wanted something in the vein of Tiny Toons, you know, that was kind of going off the air around that time, and you wanted to watch something else, you know, well, this show kind of fulfilled the niche for that in a sense.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, like I said, it's interesting to me. Like, it was an interesting experiment. You hadn't seen that. It's not like there was 2 Mario shows that were going after a different audience. Or
Yeah, right.
the closest thing you could compare it to, honestly, was the Ninja Turtles cartoon and the way that it shifted with season 8. Like, you could compare, even though they're still totally different, but you could say, like, the early Ninja Turtles stuff compared to the Red Sky seasons is almost like comparing the 2 Sonic shows, even though Adventures was way goofier than Ninja Turtles ever was. But
Yeah.
there was still that same deliberate attempt to kind of make one of them, you know, more darker, more adult kind of a thing. You know, that was really the closest you could compare. And even with Ninja Turtles, it wasn't 2 separate shows. It was just like they changed the show in its later seasons.
Hmm.
This was like the only time I could even recall ever having anything like that, where it's like this character has these 2 things happening at the same time. So it's like you're getting these 2 audiences, these 2 disparate and different audiences to all come together over the same character. I think it definitely worked for the benefit, though, because it made the character stay really relevant in a period where, like, those reruns were still airing even after the games were not coming out as steadily.
Yeah.
During, like, the Saturn lull. So, like, even if you were a Sonic fan and you weren't getting the games, like, you could still turn on TV and catch those cartoons in syndication for a couple more years. So that was actually a really good strategy by Deke, I would think.
The one thing I want to say, though, obviously, Robotnik just stole the show. I forgot his name. I think it was like John Laudry or something. He was actually like a jazz singer or a blues singer or something like that. That you would not expect him to like voice cartoons, but he did Robotnik, and yeah, he just made the show. He had the craziest expressions. It's just the voice, the accent, the rolling R's. You know, it's just fun seeing him monologue and show off, and for the kids, I guess a lot of fat butt jokes. I'm sure Johnny can agree because we were kids still. We were still like 12 or 11 or some junk. So every time the camera would just pan in on Robotnik's butt, he would always be bending over, do something silly. Or there was the one time where they had some salesman had like an anti-gravity whatever, so everyone starts floating. So Scratch and Grounder are stuck on the roof, and fucking Robotnik flies up, and like literally his butt just covers the whole screen, crushing them into the it's just crazy. We would just laugh at that shit, you know what I mean?
It's funny, but I'm like, why?
I know. And then the part where, like, sometimes, you know, you had like that weird yellow line thing. There were times where that thing would become a thong. And, and China would just be laughing about that shit. And there was one where I guess some singer made a song about Sonic. So of course that's some of the plots are that dumb. It's like, oh, there's a comic book that's just based in Robotic. Must stop them. How dare they? So now it's like there's a song about Sonic. How dare they make a song about Sonic? So Robotnik kidnaps her and forces her to make a song about Robotnik. And there's a part where Robotnik's playing the piano that whenever Johnny came to visit me, we watched it again, you know, and it's like him basically butt cheeks just bouncing. Well, he's playing and like he when he talks about how smart he is, a fucking graduation hat appears. It's just bouncing from cheek to cheek. It's just it's just insane. It's insane. You're just like that was like funny, crazy shit, you know. And and then he had his Mama Robotnik. Where even Tails was like, why is Robotnik wearing a dress? That's his mom. Oh, gross, you know. And there was an episode where they were trying to, I guess, this alien hunter babe showed up, and I guess she fell in love with Robotnik, but Robotnik, like, it wasn't mutual. So they were gonna get together, I guess. The mama came in, like, you ain't marry my boy or whatever. They start wrestling. So they literally have the mama jump into the air, spread them, and catch the hunter lady between her butt cheeks and slam her down. And it's just I know, it's insane. And it's all drawn in that, insane, crazy style. Now, one thing I do want to say, we did see it live. I remember both shows had previews. One was kind of like, at least for our station, I don't know. It was like Saturday or Sunday night. It was kind of like Sonic's coming soon, but watch a preview today. So they put that episode where Sonic first met Tails. They put that one. So we kind of saw it was going to be crazy, but we were so confused by, the characters or whatever. And I think the Saturday morning Sonic only showed like the first 5 minutes because it was like a multi-thing, different segments. So here's the first 5 minutes of Sonic coming soon, that kind of stuff. But anyways, what I want to say is we would see it later on in Mexico a couple of years down the line. We didn't care that much because whatever. But I think that stood out the most was that, well, first of all, Robotnik, they call him Mostachon, which I don't really get it. I kind of want to say, because it's not a real word. I kind of want to say it's a play on mustache, but mustache, you don't even say mustache like that in Spanish. But yeah, it was called Mostachon, and I don't know what the fuck. And the other day I saw a Spanish dub of Adventure Sonic the Hedgehog. It was still called Mostachon there. I don't know if it's Mostachon or Moscachon. I don't know. But Tails became a girl because they called her, they referred to him by female pronouns. Oh no, tenemos que, rescatarla. Like they were using female pronouns towards Tails. So I don't know if the dubbers just didn't catch it right, or I guess he just thought Tails was a girl. I don't know. I forgot. Johnny, do you remember, was he or she, whatever? Well, was he named Tails, or did they still say colas or colitas or whatever stupid thing?
No, it's dubs. They translate it as probably like colitas.
Yeah, I remember it was like that. It took me forever because they kept saying Mostachon. I was like, the fuck is that? And then, oh, Robotnik. Really? I forgot what they call Scratch and Grounder, though. I really did. Jupi, any memories?
Don't remember the Spanish dub of the cartoons that much.
Yeah, I just look it up on YouTube. Always look up, like, don't just look at the word Spanish. Look up Latin American. You'll get, like, the dub and everything. But, Jupes, any memories of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog?
Yeah, I didn't know it was going to, like, from all of you guys, y'all saw previews and stuff like that. That's not how I roll. If I was usually flipping through channels, and if I haven't just come across stuff, I would watch it. With the Saturday morning one, it was different because they kind of were promoting it on ABC like throughout the summer or whatever. They said that was coming. And then for the second season, they had the cast of Boy Meets World talking about the upcoming shows that are coming up for that next season. Look forward to the next season of the Saturday morning version of Sonic. But for Adventures, I remember I used to watch it before school because it used to come on at 7:00 here. And I was like, awesome. And the main thing I do think of when I think of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog is Griegs in the Hall of the Mountain King is where the theme song is pretty much coming from in a way, because I always like that song. So, and me, I'm a music person. So, and I always like that theme, but the show was just a little too wacky for me, but I never was confused as to why we had that version on the weekdays and why we had the Saturday morning version. It was just like, who cares? It's Sonic.
I love the Robotnik theme song, though.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's what I was thinking of. Yes, that's what I was thinking of. See, when I think of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog in comparison to the Saturday morning version, I remember more music cues and sound effects from that. Even though I haven't seen the show in years, I can hear certain sound effects and stuff say, oh, that's for Adventures. Oh, that's for Saturday morning. Because like I said, I'm a music and sound person. So that's how I remember the show.
Another thing that was kind of funny is because, kind of like how I guess Princess Peach was always known as Princess Peach, but they brought her over as Princess Toadstool, and whenever the newer game started, I think, was it Mario 64, the first one that they called her Peach, to kind of get into that. So Robotnik was always called Dr. Eggman. But I guess they thought Robotnik sounded cooler for America. But even
later on they kind of incorporated all of that together anyway. So it's even in Japan's canon. So
yeah, but the flying thing was called Egg-O-Matic. All those machines were called the exaggerated long name, put egg in there somewhere. There was even one episode where he was hungry and I guess there was no food, or I don't know what it was, but it was like, hey boss, we got food for you. And he's all like, oh, is it, boiled eggs? Is it deviled eggs? Is it omelets? And all egg, it's chili dogs. What the? Just starts going shit because it's chili dogs,
Oh, I do have another memory from watching Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. So like I mentioned, I used to watch it before school because, it used to come at like 7 o'clock here. My school bus got here around about 7:30-ish. I had like the way the house was set up, I could actually see when the bus was entering my neighborhood. So I just have to sit and watch, and I had the TV in the our family room downstairs. I'd be looking out the window, be looking between both to see when the bus is coming. Because I said I don't want to leave before Sonic says, And I like them.
Oh yeah, how could we forget to mention that?
Yeah, we didn't talk about the Sonic Says segments. We got to definitely talk about that shit because that was something.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's no good. And then, okay, here's the thing. But then after Sonic Says, I always liked the theme song. So I had to hear my theme song before I left. So I see the bus coming. I said, oh, I gotta hear my song. And then I would get it, grab myself, run up to the bus stop, usually, and then I would piss my dad off because sometimes I would be the bus and he'd have to take me to school because my school isn't close. School in middle school for me started at 8:35. My bus came at 7:30. Think about that one. So because I don't know why, the closest junior high school to me is like maybe a 5-minute drive from here. But my school was like maybe more like a 20 to 30-minute drive. If I were to take 20-minute drive, you got on the highway. I don't know why, but that's the school, the districting thing. They changed it when they built the new elementary schools over here, but
where I lived, I was lucky because I lived in a really small town anywhere. It was 1 square mile, and it pretty much just ran straight along a series of railroad tracks. And from where I lived to the school was like not even a half a mile walk. So most kids back then, in that town, there was no busing for middle school and junior high. You just walked because it was a half a mile everywhere. I told you the last episode we did, I talked about running home to watch the Mario cartoons. And that was when I lived, the house I grew up in, that was literally 1 block away from where I lived. So in this town, it was easy to catch your school time cartoons. You'd get up because, you could be at school 5 minutes after you walked out the door. So you never had to worry about it. We were
I've
lucky.
never had that luck. I've never lived close enough to school where I could do that. I've never lived close enough to school where I could walk.
High school was a little bit different.
My cousins, they technically could walk to school, but they wouldn't allow their students to walk to school because there's because of the road, and they saw it as a liability if the kids try to cross the street. They're scared they'd get hit, so they weren't allowed to walk to school.
Different time, I guess. I mean, where I grew up and when I grew up, it was a whole different game. It was like, good luck, kid. I mean, like I said, the whole town is on either side of a set of railroad tracks. So there's kind of like the right and wrong side of tracks, so to speak. But yeah, so the town is like 1 square mile and it runs pretty much in a straight line. And, you just have this army of kids walking along the railroad tracks on the way to school every day or from school. It was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, it was a different time. Nobody worried about us. We'd walk ourselves to and from school and you got there. But
one thing I want to mention also is similar to like how like the Mario cartoon was goofy and silly, but yeah, we got these death traps that if the heroes had not got away in time, it would have not been a kid show anymore. Robotnik was still had all these little funny things that were still like messed up when you think about it. This is weird though. I never really understood the reason why they just couldn't use Metal Sonic. So they had this robot Sonic called Pseudo Sonic, and they had this rat. They forced the rat to control it to, frame Sonic for crimes and do all kinds of, stupid stuff, like literally stealing candy from babies and junk like that, kids show. But it was kind of like I'll never do that. There's like a big old missile that Robotnik has tied to he has it positioned that it'll blow up his parents. They're my mom and dad. Oh, yes, if you don't go out and commit these crimes, I'll send this rocket up to your mom and dad. So that, of course, sounds like fucked up. And what I remember the most is one time I forgot what the plan was. He was either digging or breaking a dam. He was going to do something that benefited him, but at the same time, it would ruin all the crops for the town. And he was literally saying yes, it's glorious. Thousands of starving Mobians. I'm like, holy shit, dude. And the one I remember the most because it's one of those fourth wall breaks you don't see too much in cartoons because it wasn't that common. Nowadays, like almost everyone has to do at least one fourth. Well, I guess the Turtles kind of had that too. But
Yeah,
there weren't that many cartoons aside from the Turtles that did like fourth wall breaks too much. So the one thing is, one time they caught Sonic in this completely indestructible force field where he would not be able to get out. So Robotnik's all like, "Oh yes, Sonic's trapped in there while I'm out here, and I won. Yes, no one can stop me. Ah, whatever." Commercial comes back. Yes, Sonic is here, and I'm out here. Ah, or did I say that already? So it's kind of funny. They usually don't reference that. And one thing I do want to mention though is that the only time where the cartoon tried to do an episodic thing or I guess serial thing was there was I think it was a 4-part or so story where they had to go against the chaos, find the Chaos Emeralds. They changed it in the cartoons, only like about 4 of them, I think, compared to the game that had like I think it was 6 or 7 or something.
Yeah, I think they changed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The first game, it was 6, and then the games after that, it was 7. Wait,
Yeah, get them 7 Dragon Balls, But so each episode they go to different time periods to stop Robotnik from getting the emeralds, and each emerald had a different thing, like invisibility or invincibility, whatever. So the one part that always reminds me is that Robotnik got the invincibility thing. The Sonic did not know. Sonic runs up to him and tries to do the fucking Sonic spin dash on him, which of course had no effect because he's invincible. I'm thinking, dude, are you trying to slice him open? Like the fuck? You know what I mean? But yeah, because if he didn't have it, he would be slicing him in half or whatever, fucking disemboweling him and everything. Like I don't know. It's so weird, you know what I mean? It's like the cartoon rule where people with weapons can only use them on robots or things that don't work. And then the one time, let's say Wolverine can slice something, oh, it's or whatever. Or if he's gonna slice Sabretooth, no Wolverine, no, that's going too far. You know what I mean? Like they always have some whatever. So naturally Sonic will always do that when Robotnik is invincible. But one question though, was there a thing where kids were crawling into washing machines back then? Because that was a weird one.
Didn't someone copy something from Beavis and Butthead because of that? Or is that
Yeah, but that was
because Beavis and
later? Because that was one of those Sonic says, like, don't hide a washing machine, kids. Be safe. So I'm like, were kids doing that back then? Was that a thing?
I mean, I remember there being the Sonic Says segments, which I thought was quaint because that wasn't really a thing shows were doing anymore by that point.
Yeah.
Sailor Moon was.
What's that?
Sailor Moon.
Sailor
the
Moon
version anyways.
Well, it was on the way out.
Yeah.
But I don't remember too
Yeah,
many.
Joe. Sorry.
But yeah, again, well, actually, that was going to be my next point. Like, my thing with this show, watching it now, and I think even at the time, not only is it of its time, but it was also pretty much quaint by the time it debuted, in a sense, in 1993. And I'm not saying this in necessarily a disparaging sense. I'm just saying that today was the first time in a very long time that I watched Adventures of Sonic and the Saturday morning show back to back, and so, in a very long time. So it was the first time in a long time that I'd had the contrast thrust upon me so forcefully. And the Adventures of Sonic cartoon, while not a bad show, and it, in any respect, it does exactly what it's trying to do in every way. But for a show that came out in late 1993, it has a lot in common with shows that were coming out in late 1988. That makes sense?
Yeah.
As far as the tone, the writing style, the presentation, the art style, the music cues, it definitely feels more like what you would consider to be an 80s cartoon more than a 90s cartoon. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it not only does it borrow a lot from the Looney Tunes shows, but it also springboards off of a lot of things that the Mario show had already done. So by the time it debuted, it was already kind of quaint. It was nothing you hadn't necessarily seen before. And shows by then already were kind of going in a different direction, even syndicated shows. Batman animated series was pretty new, but it had been out for a while, and was a huge game changer. But even by then, you had the X-Men cartoon, you had the Spider-Man cartoon. So a show like Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was perfectly acceptable, but it also kind of felt like it showed up a little late. It was already a little bit dated, and watching it now, it's even more dated.
Yeah.
But if you said it came out in 89 or so and nobody knew better, be like, okay, I believe that, because everything about it just screams 89. So, I mean, there's good and bad to it. Like, it's well done for that kind of a show, but it's also at the same time very cheap, because if you notice, there's like no backgrounds ever. They just kind of
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
They splotch paint everywhere. Only the character models and something like one foreground object will have any outline or definition, like an old Hanna-Barbera show.
Yeah.
And when you look at the fact that Deke had different studios, but ultimately it's still Deke doing the production, you had them splitting resources between Adventures of Sonic and then the Saturday morning show. And then if you watch them back to back, it kind of makes you think they only had like $10 left to do the syndicated show.
Yeah.
Because the second I saw the intro for the Saturday morning show, which I have the Saturday morning show on behind me, so I watched a little bit of Adventures, and then I flipped the disc to the Saturday morning show, and as soon as I see the intro, it was like, holy shit. Like, this looks like it's from a whole other decade now.
Yeah.
But it was the same company, same time, same basic thing. It's cool, but at the same time, I think it hurts the show in a lot of ways, because even though it did, by most fans' accounts, like, a lot of people love the show. Like, they really enthusiastically love the show. And they say, well, it's the closest like the games. True. In a very one-dimensional sense.
Yeah.
It does have more game elements than the other shows do. You have the tracks that look like stages from the game with the loops and the checkerboards and the fucking deal, the floating platforms and whatever. The music cues from the Green Hill Zone, the da-da-da-da-da, and then that becomes the intro to the show itself, and so it becomes that music you identify with Sonic forever. So they brought over a lot of elements of the first two games, just like the Mario cartoon did. And it did it in a way that had worked before. I know for me personally, the kind of show that worked for me huge in 89 when I was like 7 or 8, when I was 12 going on 13, it didn't hit the same anymore, I watched it, I liked it for what it was, but immediately it kind of, I was a little bit meh about it. That was my thing. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It definitely wasn't my favorite show.
I know I'm sure Johnny did too. I know we loved it back then. It's just kind of hard to watch it now. That's what I'm saying. You notice how loud, obnoxious it is as a kid, whatever, but now it is kind of hard to watch. And the jokes are kind of lame, that kind of stuff. I do want to say real quick, though, one adult joke they snuck in there, because of course they had to, was one episode where Robotnik was making like the whole parody of The Bride of Frankenstein. And I don't know why, I don't know what the evil plan was or whatever. But, oh yeah, there's another joke I like. There was a joke where it was kind of like, like, quick, read this map or whatever. And Grounder or someone was like, attractive single male, slightly overweight, searching for, that's the wrong one. That was funny. But anyways, the Bride of Frankenstein knockoff, whatever they called her, they drew her with gigantic boobs. And while she was lying there waiting to be, the whole lightning to activate her, it's like, whoa, Robotnik and whatever. And Grounder's like, whoa, she's got such big and what's her name? Scratch is like, hair, just cuts them off right there. So it's kind of funny. They play with that in the kids' cartoon. But I think
Johnny, what are some other things, good or bad, that stood out to you? Because you were hot for a minute, but you've been in the background. You got to have some thoughts about some of these other things we brought up, at least, right? What are you thinking?
Oh, about the cartoony Sonic cartoons?
Yeah, the adventures, like all of it.
The adventures. Okay, so Obviously, it's kind of weird that there's like two versions of Sonic. You have the more comical, more like the Looney Tunes type Sonic, and the artwork looks like all over the place. They look like Picasso for the most part. Like it's just I don't know, it's just sloppy, whatever. And
It was kind of like watercolor backgrounds in a sense, which is kind of neat, but the way it all lacked definition just felt cheap to me.
so I'm not gonna lie. I mean, especially because I was very young back then, I did like the show. It was funny. I was laughing. You know, it was very entertaining. It's so cool that like one of the most famous popular video game character at that time that was competing heavily against Nintendo with Mario gets to have his cartoon. Like how cool is that? You know, you have Sonic and Tails and Robotnik. You know, the whole thing. You know, with Sonic. But yeah, face value, it still did its job. It still bring the more popularity into the characters, and you know they took advantage of that. You know, that, hey, Sonic is popular, so now we have a cartoon show, and you know, kids are gonna still watch the show. I was watching that show every day. You know, I think I was watching that like I was watching it every day, like after school. Like it was a highlight of the day. I can't wait for school to finish. I can't wait for school to finish so I can go home and watch Sonic cartoons. And it's also funny because I never really had shitty dogs. I think I've said this in the previous podcast, but I never had shitty dogs before then. And thanks to that Sonic cartoon, we had like a local mom and pop type. It's a place called Denny's, and they serve like burgers and hot dogs.
It wasn't the Denny's, the big franchise Denny's.
Not the big Denny's, called
Denny's, you know.
Yeah.
But it was. But yeah, it was cool because it's like me and my brother, we never really had chili dogs. And thanks to that cartoon, it's like, okay, I'm going to eat the chili dogs. And I actually like the chili dogs. My brother didn't really like chili dogs that much because they had beans in it. He doesn't really like beans that much. So
I can take them or leave them.
Yeah. Now the thing is,
I always like chili dogs, so I used to see it as a treat.
Yeah.
I'm not
The thing is,
like messy food. I'm not really like big on.
Yeah. The thing is, like the cartoon, like, you know, we already talked about the art style. It wasn't very clear what of all wasn't a chili dog. I didn't know. I was a kid. I didn't know. So when we went to the place, hey, and they're going to make me one, I'm like, oh, dude, what the fuck? Why it got beans on it or whatever? And, you know, I was a dumb kid. Now, when I'm older now, I still don't like beans. But the thing is, I've kind of learned to tolerate them in the sense that since they're in the chili and, you know, like it's not beans on its own. It's not a hot dog covered in beans. It's a hot dog with the chili and the beans, and it's kind of hot and spicy. You don't taste the beans that much and when you eat it. So, you know, I eat them now. But back when I was a kid, I was just like, ew, gross. I wouldn't even like, you know, they say, how do you know you don't like it if you don't try it? I didn't want to try them, you know, but now that I got older, you know. And the funny thing is here they got cans of stuff called hot dog sauce, which I just hate that word, hot dog sauce, which is kind of like chili, I guess, you put on hot dogs. I'm like, no, you fuck that shit. I would buy legit, like actual chili and cook it up first, then put that shit on hot dogs. And of course, I would buy, no, sorry, go on.
I would just make my own chili.
Yeah,
I like making. I rather make it from scratch anyway.
I would always get the spicier meat flavored ones and put that in my hot dog. So yeah, if we ever go eat sometime, Johnny, you'll notice that now I do eat chili dogs and everything.
Okay.
But yeah, as a kid, I was like, oh God, what the? And my parents like, what's wrong? You know, Mark, they always had beans on them. I didn't know.
But yeah, I do agree. If you just buy regular, I mean, of course, if you could actually make chili beans from scratch, it's even better. But let's be honest, most people, you know, you just buy chili beans in the can. But yeah, just regular chili beans and the hot dog. It's
not just
good.
beans. It's ground beef mixed up with beans too. You know what I mean?
I use bison.
Mm-hmm.
Trivia time.
I like spicy.
So this show was actually the place where the whole Sonic chili dog connection came from in the first place. It all comes back to this show. Why? I'm not entirely sure. It's just maybe because, again, that's my agent. He can wait. Try to probably book me for another Calvin Klein ad. I guess Deke probably figured, well, we used a lot of food gags in the Mario cartoons, so we'll do the same thing with the Sonic cartoons. They're like, well, what do hedgehogs eat? I don't fucking know. So I guess they probably decided they would do like a Ninja Turtles deal. Pizza was already spoken for, so they're like, well, what's another like cool kind of food that like is kind of kid friendly? And it'd be like chili dogs. Okay, why not?
Yeah, it was
That's
the same
I-
thing. Where that's all Sonic ate was fucking chili dogs nonstop. Just because the turtles, all they ate was pizza. It's like so weird back then.
I
Like,
get a stomachache.
like you would never
I
see
get a
Mario
stomachache.
eat a burger. He would only eat pasta stuff. Every cartoon had to have their one food, and it's all they ever fucking ate.
I used to hate that shit. Doesn't make sense. You'd be anemic if all you ever ate was one thing. You'd have rickets and God knows what else.
Yeah. I mean, it serves to like help you remember. So like, oh yeah, I used to watch that show. Them turtles ate pizza all the time, didn't they? You kind of remember it, but
Jupi
watching and thinking about it, you know what I mean?
Jupi was gonna say something.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, I was saying, yeah, I would get probably a stomachache if I ate what they ate all the time. But I want to give the turtles a little bit of a pass. Yeah, they ate pizza all the time, but they always had different types of toppings, so they were getting something.
Here's another thing about the chili dog.
I don't know.
At one point, somebody in the letters column of the comic book raised a very interesting question later on, because as the comic book and the cartoons went on, it became established that among the other species of anthropomorphs on planet Mobius, your hedgehogs, your foxes, your squirrels, your what have you, there were a lot of pigs and stuff like that, and a lot of hot dogs are made with pork, or beef, but mostly pork, right? So somebody was like, they raised the question, is like, so what exactly is in those chili dogs? Because
Chicken.
he has friends who are pigs who fight alongside him. So in the editors, they're like, oh, they're chicken franks. They're chicken franks.
I'm sure they got friends that are chickens too. You know what I mean?
But you don't really see them.
Yeah,
You don't really
that's true.
see them. You see domesticated chickens, just like he has a domesticated dog. Dogs are interesting on Mobius because they have anthropomorphic dogs who walk and talk and everything like people do, but Sonic also has a domestic dog. So it's an interesting ecosystem, just like Sally is a squirrel chipmunk or whatever, but you also have like tiny little squirrel chipmunks running around in the background. So it must be a very interesting place to live.
Yeah.
You know how everybody's always wondering why Goofy can talk but Pluto can't? Like, you multiply that shit on Mobius because you're dealing with it across the board, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was just interesting. Like, somebody put him to the wall. They were like, so what's in those fucking things? They're like, oh, canonically they're chicken franks and the chili dogs. Okay.
I never liked chicken franks. I hate the taste.
Well, I guess we can kind of move on to the second show now. I don't know if anyone else has any more memories of
There was another quick trivia thing. So this was the only Sonic cartoon of the era to have an official video game tie-in. This was the only one that had its own game. What was the game that was specifically based on the cartoon show, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog?
one that officially came out or one that didn't?
It did come out. It came out for multiple systems, and it was
Sonic
very, very
Spinball.
popular. No. It was
No.
not based on it. It was not based on Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. There was one game. Came out for many systems, and it was very popular.
I mean, I don't think it would be Sonic Triple Trouble. I don't think so.
No.
Oh, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean
The
Machine.
name is crap. I didn't even think of that.
Scratch,
I had
Grounder,
that
and
game.
Coconuts are all official bosses in Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine.
And Robotnik, of course,
I forgot.
looks like his cartoon version.
Yep, the exact same character model as
Same
Adventures of
year.
Sonic the Hedgehog. So yes, this was.
I'm so dumb. Now, I did mention because Sonic Spinball was interesting. There were the little mini games. There was one part where there's like a bunch of scratches walking around. You got to get past them. But ironically enough and oddly enough, you could rescue like Princess Sally and Rotor and them from the. So it was like a mixture of both cartoons.
Sally, Bunny, Mutsky, and yeah, I think Sally, Bunny, Mutsky. They were all cameos in Spinball, yeah, because that's the best they could do. It was supposed to be. Well, we'll talk more about that, but yeah, that was that game's tie-in. But yeah, there was only one. There was only one game that was purposely built to be based on a cartoon.
Yeah.
Machine based on
that, yeah, I kind of want to bang my head against the wall for that one.
Me
Game
too. I
Gear.
forgot about that one.
Sega Game Gear.
But the other
It
thing
came out
too,
for a
I
while,
remember
very popular.
Sonic Triple Trouble, even though it's based on the regular games, like Robotnik was still drawn in that cartoony style on the cover. And I believe one of the Game Gear versions of Sonic Spinball had Robotnik drawn like the cartoon version on the cover. I think with Triple Trouble in Japan, Robotnik looked like his, regular stuff from the games. In America, they made the cover. They were trying to get that little synergy going, I guess, even though it's still pretty different and all that.
So the show ran for one season of 65 episodes, which is pretty respectable, especially because it got aired in repeats pretty much through the end of the decade.
Yeah.
Then it came out on Shout Factory. Yeah, it was on USA for a little while.
It was? Oh, no, honestly, for me, I have no recollection of where I watched the show, honestly. Before school, that's the only time I saw Adventures. Outside of that school year, I never saw it beyond that.
It got bounced around a little bit because, again, it aired on regular syndication from 93 to 94. And then it got bumped to weekday mornings from like 94 to 96. And then USA picked it up for a year in 96, along with the other Sonic cartoons. So it aired both Sonic cartoons on USA for a while. And then it just got bounced around a lot of smaller syndicated stations in the late 90s. But yeah, it was...
I think I know why I probably didn't see it, because I went to high school and I had to go to school earlier. Yeah, I started going earlier because I hated how my bus would make us late. And then we would get detention, and I didn't like detention, so I just got to school like about an hour early, just so I could avoid that. So so my mother had to drive me to school.
It's a bummer, but yeah, that was why I stopped watching it when it was on weekday mornings, was because I started high school in 96, and that was actually the year it got switched over to USA Network anyway. But either way, I wouldn't have seen it because I would have been going to school at 7. I would have had to get out of the house by 6:30. So yeah.
Oh yeah, one thing you probably mentioned because it'll segue into the other thing. Remember the Sonic the Hedgehog Christmas special?
Yeah, I was gonna say this show had its own epilogue, which was the Christmas special, which was what the hell was it called? Sonic Christmas Blast. It was originally going to be called Sonic Extremely Sonic Christmas because it was going to tie into the game Sonic Extreme, which never came out. But yeah, that was the original plan. So yeah, that aired
Sonic Christmas Blast because they had a game called Sonic 3D Blast for a while there.
Yeah, that's why they switched the title.
I don't like that game.
That aired in the fall of 96, so 3 years after this show aired. Interesting. It's a way to do it, I guess. Yeah, Robotnik dress up like Santa Claus to try to ruin Christmas.
He was drawn kind of crappy.
Yeah, I don't think they put a lot of work into it. I remember people were excited, then disappointed.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all. I think there was excitement when it was announced. I remember especially because in the letters page of the comic book, they were like, oh, there's this Christmas special coming out. And, oh, by the way, Princess Sally's going to be in it. So I remember me and my buddy, we got together to watch it. He taped it, and we sat down to watch it, and we were so excited, and then we were like, it's all right. It wasn't really that good. And after all the hype for the Sally cameo, she says nothing, and they used her old, like, friggin' character model from the pilot when she was colored wrong. So it was just really cheap, and it was like stupid. And it was like, yeah, we were very disappointed when we saw the Christmas Blast show.
Yeah, it was kind of like Maggie in The Simpsons, like that future episode. Whenever she would talk, they would interrupt her or something. So Sonic came, gave her like a gift or something, and then like just left, and Sonic was so like, without letting her talk, because I guess they had no real actress available or whoever or something.
I mean, it was something, but I remember like there was huge disappointment around it, and it felt, the whole thing just felt really rushed and lazy. Like, let's just get something out to get something out, because they didn't really have anything in development, and those were like, that was 96. That was like the lean years were just starting for Sonic, 96 to 99, there wasn't a lot going on. The franchise, there was a lot of serious concern it wasn't going to rebound because they didn't have a game out on the major consoles. They were limping along with like the handheld stuff, but no real Saturn Sonic games, so that was kind of a bummer for a lot of people. So yeah, it was basically at that point, those couple years, if you were a Sonic fan, it was because of two reasons. You were either getting the comic book every month, or you were watching these shows on repeats as much as you could.
Mhm.
Or you're playing the old games over and over again just because they were available.
No other way to interact. Like, there was no games coming out. It was exactly it. Play the old games, watch these reruns, and buy the comic books. I had a subscription to the comics, so that was actually what kept me into it. But yeah, like, I watched the reruns as much as I could. Like, USA used to air a block on weekends, so like I'd be able to set my VCR on Saturdays still for a while. But then, yeah, when USA got rid of both shows in like 97, after that you couldn't see them anymore for a while anywhere. Real small syndicated stations had them like randomly. They'd have them for like 6 months or whatever. But it was tough until the DVDs started coming out. So I picked up all those, of course, for all the shows just because I'm a completionist. It wasn't my favorite show, but of course I was going to get the DVDs. You can't not do that. So the Shout Factory ones, the originals, they're a little hard to find now, but it's been re-released, I think, by a couple different companies. So it's pretty easy to find now, all 65 episodes. So if you are into that kind of show or you're nostalgic for it, I mean, it's out there to get. I don't recommend binge watching it. I think it'd be kind of like giving yourself an ice cream headache, but it's not a bad show for what it is. And I think a kid watching it, like I think if I was 7 when it came out, like I was 7 for Super Mario Brothers, I would have liked it a lot more because I had a lot simpler taste back then. But yeah, that's really all I could say about it to wrap it up for this show, was that it was fine for what it was. I think a 7-year-old kid would love it, but I was a 12-year-old kid, so I just tolerated it.
It was just brain dead entertainment for me. I just said, hey, this is funny. I like Robotnik. I like how he has hate written on his teeth. I mean, stuff like that.
Yeah, it wasn't like bad for exactly what it tried to be. It just didn't aim very high at all. Like, it aimed very low, settled for very little.
Well, wait, before you seg into the next series, I just have one thing to say. Are we about to seg into the next series?
We were gonna get the next one, I think, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much good. Yeah.
All right, so I just have one thing to say before you seg into the next series. Pingas.
Oh God,
I am done.
Pingas. The Pingas meme.
What happened?
There was an episode where
that came from.
There was an episode where Robotnik was watching, I guess, Sonic on a view screen or some junk, and Scratch and Grounder were overhearing, so they accidentally like crashed through the wall or something like that. So they fell, and Robotnik's like, snooping as usual, I see. So when the internet became the internet, and Robotnik was in a lot of these little internet things, someone cut the snooping ass part to say pingas.
Yeah.
Pingas!
Yeah.
And there was even a part where someone once edited a Sonic part to say, so if Dr. Robotnik wants to grab your pingas, that's good.
That was so lame.
That was so, and in fact, our buddy Angel in the Video Game Master show, plug, her opening thing, well, no, she still does it. Her opening thing was just pingas, and all that. And whenever she ends each show, we're saying our thing, and here's Angel snooping as usual. So that's like her thing. We got it from there, in case anyone didn't know. So now you know the secret, guys, of Angel's catchphrase,